Hi, everyone. It's Claudia, founder of Hugo Coffee Roasters and Hugo's Human. I'm here today to talk to you about the difference between an animal shelter and animal rescues. They're two very different animals. The animal shelter, for example, will be typically a governmental entity. It'll be run by a governmental entity. So it'll be a city or a county or a municipality or a state, some kind of governmental run facility that is charged with accepting animals. Like that's where, for example, you would see, the typical dog catcher. The dog catcher works for the animal shelter. And dog catchers go around and they pick up stray animals or dogs that are off leash, because most municipalities and most governments have leash laws. So it is incumbent on the animal shelter or the animal control department to enforce those rules and to pick up strays. Animal shelters are also places that individuals can turn in their animals. So, for example, like right now, with COVID winding down and people going back to work, a lot of the animals that were adopted during the COVID crisis are now being turned back into animal shelters because people are going back to work and they no longer want to take care or can no longer take care of animals. It also happens often where people will turn in an elderly animal that they can't afford the medical care for. So they would turn that animal into an animal shelter. Similarly, shelters will pick up more than just like cats and dogs. They'll pick up, I know in Summit County, they've picked up horses, they've picked up livestock, they've picked up all kinds. Anyway, the key thing is animal shelters are run by a governmental entity and versus an animal rescue. Now, an animal rescue organization tends to be, or is usually typically, a nonprofit that is volunteer based. They're often 100% volunteer based. And what an animal rescue does is a rescue takes the animals from the shelters. That's where rescues get the animals. So, for example, when I ran Friends of Animals, which is now Nuzzles and Company, it's called pulling animals. So you would pull animals from shelters. So we would typically pull from either Summit County or West Valley. West Valley City has a very big shelter and it's got tons of animals. So we would go down to the West Valley shelter periodically, or they would call us if they had an animal that was healthy and adoptable. They would call us and we would go down and we would pull that animals. And before you pull an animal, we would often do a temperament test. And we would even pull, we didn't necessarily only pull like very healthy animals, but we pulled animals that were determined to be adoptable, right? Because the purpose of a rescue is to find an animal's forever home. So rescues pull animals from shelters, from municipal shelters, and then a rescue will typically spay and neuter, give the vaccines to the animal before you would ever allow it to be adoptable. So spay and neuter, vaccinate, and often take care of minor, not typically major medical problems, even though there are rescues that definitely focus on the elderly and medically challenged animals. The rescue I used to run, Nuzzles, we didn't really take super medically challenged animals. We would take, because there were so many animals, we would tend to take the ones that were easily vaccinated and medically cared for. And Nuzzles and Company also had a brick and mortar place for animals to reside while they await being adopted to their forever home. And that was the Rescue Ranch. And the Rescue Ranch had tons of areas where cats and dogs could live. And we separated out where animals were ill from the healthy population. We did that for cats and dogs. Anyway, so rescues often have some brick and mortar presence, but many smaller or medium-sized rescues are foster-based, which means they will take animals from shelters, or shelters will call and say, we have these animals, can you come get them? And they'll take them into the system, and then they will farm the animals out throughout their foster network, while they would then try to get those animals adopted to their forever homes. So very different animals between a rescue and a shelter. And shelters are often, depending on where you live, shelters can also be kill or no kill shelters. So that has like historically been one of the main drivers of rescue organizations, is to stop the slaughtering of healthy adoptable animals by pulling them and bringing them into the rescue and then getting them adopted out. So one key thing that happens all the time, like when I was with Friends of Animals, and even today, like on Facebook, I'll see people saying, I can't take care of my animal anymore. Can Nuzzles and Company, can somebody give me contact with Nuzzles and Company and I can drop the animal off? Well, that is not how rescues work. That's how shelters work. If you want to turn in an animal, that you would go to a shelter. Then that shelter would give that animal to a rescue organization for that rescue organization to find their forever home. So very different organizations. One is municipal. It's driven by statute. It's got paid employees. The other rescues are typically volunteer-based. They're nonprofits. They're sustained by donations, and very different, but they work together beautifully. If it weren't for one really needs the other to exist in the most robust fashion. So when you have a great relationship, like Nuzzles has a great relationship with a number of shelters, then you have this constant stream of great animals coming through your system, where you then get to adopt those animals out and find their forever home. It is a very symbiotic system. It used to, back in the day, like when their kill shelters were more common than they are today, it wasn't so symbiotic. It could be antagonistic, but that is not really the case anymore. So that is the difference between a shelter and a rescue organization. And as you all know, Hugo Coffee, I'm a foster failure. I got Hugo, and this is a typical example of how things happen. So Hugo was he was bred, he's a backyard breeder dog. So a breeder, quote breeder, had bred two animals, which they claimed were like English bulldogs, but that was totally not true. Or French bulldogs, again, totally not true. So they would backyard breed, and then they would try to pre-sell the puppies. Well, the breeder of Hugo pre-sold all the animals but Hugo, and Hugo was turned into an animal shelter at 3 weeks old. That animal shelter, you cannot take a baby puppy into a shelter or a rescue because they haven't been vaccinated, and it's not safe to put them in a system with a bunch of other animals. So Hugo was turned into a shelter. That shelter then called Nuzzles and Company. Nuzzles and Company grabbed Hugo. I fostered Hugo, and I'm a foster failure, which means I adopted Hugo, because after bottle feeding him, because I got him at 3 weeks old, and he was weaned way too early, which is probably, by the way, a lot of reason why he has some issues. Anyway, after bottle feeding that guy, there was no way in hell I was going to get rid of him. No way in hell I was going to let go of him. I was going to adopt him. So I'm a foster failure. Hugo is my handsome adopted pup, who I then named Hugo Coffee Roasters after. And our mission, as you all know, is to save animals by roasting and selling fantastic fair trade organic coffee. And we do so by supporting animal rescues. We don't support typically animal shelters. I'm not saying I wouldn't if a shelter needed help, but I have not written a check to an animal shelter because they're funded by governmental entities versus rescue organizations, which need every dollar that they can find to get animals, to get them healthy, and to find them their forever homes. So that is the difference between shelters and rescues. So I hope you all enjoyed my little talk. And if you're ever interested in adopting, you're going to go to a rescue. But shelters, by the way, also sometimes adopt. Like I know Summit County, that they also will adopt right out of their shelter. So they'll give some animals to Nuzzles and Company, and they'll keep some animals and adopt them out themselves. So so sources of animal rescue could be shelters or rescues, but I would go first to a rescue, because the rescue, and I'm not sure about every shelter, but the rescue, will have spayed and neutered, vaccinated, and temperament tested the animal you're about to adopt. Okay, that's it from me today. Have a wonderful day. Drink coffee, save animals.